It's George Harrison here. Look, if you want me to say writing on air from Chapel FM, I'll say it.
So, welcome to Chapel FM Arts Centre, day 7 of Writing in Air 2024. We're halfway through the afternoon. We've got another day tomorrow of fantastic events. It may be blowing a gale out there, but inside it's a picture of calm. We've got some actors ready to do a play by the author who I have standing here next to me, Brian Hull. So, hello, Brian.
Hello, pleased to meet you.
So, Brian, it's great, by the way, to have this connection with Aberford. Emmy, sitting here, introduced us to the Aberford authors and to the Aberford Literature Festival. Chris came on and did an interview just before the festival, so it's lovely to have this connection for the first time. But yes, tell us about the play that we're about to hear, The Forgery.
Well, for my part, I've been researching as a local historian a property just outside Aberford called Parlington Hall and the estate there, which was owned by the Gascoigne family from the 16th century through to the 60s. And it was on the basis of that some of the discoveries that I've made over the years, one of them was in fact a fraud of the old colonel at Parlington shortly before his death in June 1905. And that was an idea I put forward to the Aberford Authors Group at one of our meetings, and out of that evolved this particular play that we're doing this afternoon.
Brilliant. Have you performed the play before?
Once before, yes. We've tried it a couple of times in the pub as well, testing it out. We're all new to this, I am especially, but it's been interesting, you know, the whole purpose of putting a play together and working out the different parts and gathering suitable players to perform it as well.
I'm sure they're very suitable. They look very suitable. Yeah. I'm really looking forward to it, yes. So, well, is there anything more you'd like to add about the history?
The history of Parlington is perhaps best characterised by the country having many large country houses dotted around the country through from the sort of 17th century right up to the 20th century. And Parlington was one of these such places. As it came into the 20th century, the family was dying out. And the hall was abandoned and left to fall apart. By the 1960s, the estate was sold, and to this day, what remains of Parlington is just solely the west wing. The rest of it was demolished through up until 1961. So the family themselves had moved to Lotherton Hall on the other side of Aberford, on the east side of Aberford, and they remained there until the 1970s when Lotherton, the whole of the estate, was passed over to the people of Leeds, held by Leeds City Council, and to this day it's a popular tourist attraction.
So who lives in the West Wing?
Well, the West Wing, originally, the young colonel at Lotherton decided it would be a good idea, albeit the hall had been abandoned, with his father's death, and they would just create 2 agricultural cottages out of the West Wing and demolish the rest of the house. And those 2 cottages remained and stayed as 2 agricultural cottages until the 1980s, when the present owners decided it would be a good idea to convert the 2 cottages back to one, essentially returning it back to being Parlington Hall, and by renaming it, they were able to up the rent, of course. So that was a very particularly attractive proposition for them.
Have they seen the play?
Have they seen the play? Yeah. No, they haven't seen the play. The new owners may be interested in it because it's a part of life in the Aberford area, which local people might find interesting, but I don't know whether it'll travel much further, to be honest.
Well, there may be people listening all over the world to this.
I realise that.
No pressure.
That's what's making me nervous, yeah.
Broke into a sweat immediately. No, it's fine. We're really looking forward to hearing the play. So thanks ever so much. The Forgery.
The named characters in the story are real, and the play is based on true events. The frauds against the old colonel, Frederick Trench Gascoigne, at Parlington did occur, but the crime was not uncovered until 1906, when Inspector Arrow interviewed Maud Willing and her partner, Edward Willing, already in prison for a similar offence. Those convicted in the Gascoigne case were Frederick Arthur Fane and Philip Montague Peach. The characters in the play are as followed. Colonel Richard Trench Gascoigne, performed by Brian Hull. Inspector Charlie Arrow, performed by Chris Berry. Bank Manager, performed by Andrew Spark. Hotel Manager, performed by Jonathan Davis. Hotel Porter, performed by Kathy Burwell. Mrs. Gwendolyn Trench Gascoigne, performed by Kathy Burwell. Lewis Hawkett, chauffeur, performed by Andrew Spark. And narrator, performed by Stephanie Davis. Scene 1. We start at Claridge's Hotel in London, June 1905. The weather is fair and balmy. Colonel Gascoigne is looking forward to some good racing. Meanwhile, in the city, he has looked up an old military acquaintance, Charles Arrow, nowadays of Scotland Yard, and an inspector to boot.
Well, Charlie, I received a telegram this very morning from the butler at Parlington concerning my father, the old colonel, and it seems father has been done.
Done?
Yes, fraud. His bank, Drummond's, had contacted him to advise that his account had been taken for £900.
Good grief, that's a considerable sum of money. What can we do?
First stop Drummond's bank and let's quiz the manager. I do say, it's fortuitous that you and I met today. Your help will be invaluable.
Naturally, I'll do what I can.
At the bank in Charing Cross, in the West End of London, the inquiry continued.
So you're saying you cashed a cheque drawn on Colonel Frederick Trench Gascoigne's account, but it was written and signed on headed cheque forms from the Navy and Military Club, 94 Piccadilly, London, supplied by Holt & Co., the club's bankers, and that seemed in order to you?
Well, now you ask, we were surprised, although we were unsure the colonel was a member, so we sent a runner to the club to get confirmation that the colonel was staying with them. When told he was not, we immediately telegrammed him at his home.
But you'd already paid out the cash.
Yes, I'm afraid we had. The signature was very convincing.
Did the cashier get a good look at the person presenting the cheque?
Well, sadly, it was a porter from the Langham Hotel who had been sent on behalf of a gentleman to collect the money.
How was the payment made up?
Well, they had requested these denominations on this note.
With that, the manager handed over a letter written on the Langham Hotel notepaper to the colonel. It read, "Dear Sir, please hand bearer in exchange for enclosed cheque 16 £50 notes, 5 £10 notes, 5 £5 notes, and the remainder in gold. Signed, P.F. Tate." That's the name of the payee on the cheque.
Well, this is all very irregular. It appears one's money is open to any fraudster who may happen into your bank.
I assure you, sir, that we take every precaution to ensure our clients' assets are safe.
Really? Yet you openly admit being cautious to the extent you sent out the club a runner, but unfortunately after the payment was made. Why were you only concerned after making the payment?
Well, sir, the colonel was a well-known philanthropist, and we had paid out many cheques previously on his account.
For £900?
Admittedly not that much, sir, but as I say, the signature was very convincing.
Right, the trail is still warm, thanks to the telegraph. Only yesterday, one of your porters was asked to take a message from the hotel to Drummond's bank. The message called for the teller to hand over £900 in various denominations and some gold. He was to give the teller a cheque from Colonel Gascoigne for this sum. The money was issued and the porter returned to the hotel and presumably handed it over to our culprits.
Right, sir. I'll get the porter immediately, and we can ask him what he knows about the people concerned.
After a short while away, the manager returned, trailed by a rather glum-looking young man, of thinnish build, in the uniform of a porter for the Langham Hotel. Arrow ensured he was the first to level a question at the man.
Ah, young man, it seems you are in trouble. Aiding and abetting an offender and handling money acquired by fraud. What have you to say?
I'm sorry, sir. I was just doing my job.
Yes. They all say that, don't they, Colonel? How do we know you were not party to the plan?
Then the Colonel interjected.
What were they like, young? What were they like, young, old, tall, short? Come on, lad, think.
Well, to be honest, old, I'd say. Well, that is the man. He must have been late 50s or more, sir. I can't be sure about the woman. Plus, she hardly spoke. Oh, yes, and he wore a brown trilby, a hat, a lighter coat, military cape style. And I remember because he asked me to take them to the cloakroom when they first arrived.
Good, this is progress. Were they staying guests?
No, Inspector. I've already taken the opportunity to check that out.
So, they came in, pretended to be doing business, asked you to fetch the money from Drummond's, took the proceeds and disappeared, eh?
Well, not quite, sir, as they asked me to pick up a portmanteau from a shop en route, said they'd ordered it, and I was to pay for it out of the money obtained from the bank.
And you did this?
Yes, sir, and they tipped me too.
So, receiving stolen money as well, lad. Things don't look good for you.
At this, the porter looked visibly shaken. His pallor took on a grey tinge. However, the Colonel would have none of it.
I say, Arrow, dear chap, the fellow is quite innocent, I'm sure, and has been most helpful.
If you're sure, sir, then I'll return to the yard and make this an official inquiry to find the criminals.
Very well, Charles, and we'll meet in the morning as previously arranged at my hotel at 9 o'clock.
Yes, sir.
With that, Arrow took his leave back to the yard, and the young porter was allowed to return to his duties. The manager, sensing that they had provided answers to the two inquirers, looked more relaxed and suggested the Colonel might like a drink at the bar.
Indeed, yes, I'd like a single malt.
Oh, whatever is your preference, sir. And I might add, we don't like people coming to our hotel with criminal intent and ruining our reputation. Might I also ask, where are you staying?
Claridge's on Brook Street.
Ah, so not far, but do let me arrange a cab for you to take you there when you wish to leave.
Thank you. And let me tell you, this is a fine single malt.
The hotel manager hailed the doorman, who ensured a cab was waiting for the Colonel to return to Claridge's. The next morning, Colonel Gascoigne awaited for Inspector Arrow to arrive, as agreed, at 9. Arrow did not disappoint. He was always prompt.
Morning, Colonel. Another lovely day, just right for the racing.
Morning to you, Inspector. Did you raise an arrest warrant for the fraud against my father?
Indeed I did, Colonel, and I have some news.
You do? Do tell me.
Well, an informer tipped me off to a couple who are posing as man and wife, but really fraudsters, getting information on victims and, as it were, selling it on to the higher rollers, such as your man in the brown trilby.
I see. And you think you may be able to track them down?
No need, as I see it, sir. For what it's worth, the money needs to be melted down, so to speak. There is a term for it, slang if you like, in the criminal world, called laundering, sir.
So how does that help?
Well, see, sir, the money in large denominations is pretty obvious, and the serial numbers are known to us. If I were to offer you a fiver or a tenner, say for a small item, I end up with lots of small change, but particularly, it's not traceable anymore. And where would be a good place to do such a thing?
Well, you tell me, Inspector Arrow. That's your game.
Tell you, no, sir. Show you, yes, sir.
With that, the coach arrived and they went on their way. 2 hours later, in the main enclosure at Ascot, 2 men, anonymous to the world, enjoyed the first race. Then, as Arrow returned to the bookie, There before him, audacious as ever, was a man in a brown trilby hat and a military green coat.
Intuition. It's what makes a good copper.
Arrow reminded himself, and with that he stepped directly before the man, straight to his face, and loudly proclaimed,
Hello, Mr. Fane. Having a good day, are we? You'll remember me. Arrow. Inspector Charlie Arrow.
The man froze, looking deathly still, for what seemed to him an eternity. Then, with the agility of a person of much younger years, he bolted away. But alas, right into the grip of the colonel, who, having seen off the Mahdi in the Sudan during the quest to free Gordon at Khartoum, was not a person to mess with, least of all when his inheritance was threatened.
Right, lad. Now then, Mr. Fane, where did you get all those fivers?
Before Fane had even begun to speak, the sure click of the handcuffs ended his sporting day. With that, the three men returned to London, Fane claiming his innocence against deaf ears. The serial numbers said everything.
You, Frederick Arthur Fane, are going to a place you will not like for a very long length of time.
Fane looked defeated. How could they have been on him so quick? The trick was only run but 2 days before. Then, as they entered the yard, Arrow was given a further note. It seems a second team had tried the same game at Beckett's Bank, Park Row in Leeds. But the offenders had bolted when they thought they had been rumbled, as the portmanteau had not been collected, suggesting their ruse had failed. The sum of money involved was the same at £900. The fraudsters succeeded in getting the money from the bank, which was later found and returned to the bank. Had they succeeded, they would have brought the total fraud to £1,800. Colonel Gascoigne took his leave of Inspector Arrow. They'd made a good team, he thought, and restored some of the family pride. On the train back home to Lotherton, Dick reflected on the few days. The short leg of the journey from York to Garforth was the last of the 200-mile trip, and sure enough, testimony to the modern telegraph. Young Louis Hawkett was waiting at the station with the old carriage.
Ah, Hawkett, soon be home.
Welcome home, sir. It's good to see you, but Mrs. Gascoigne awaits in the carriage with news to give you.
Hello, my dear. How good of you to come.
Alas, Dick, it is good and bad. Good you're safely home, but early this morning we were roused by the butler from Parlington. He rode over to tell us himself. I'm afraid the old colonel died at about 5:30 this very morning. Parlington is at an end.
The story ends here, but bringing the figures up to date, were you to convert the 900 from each fraud, giving 1,800 in total, to the equivalent at today's prices, gives a crime value of nearly £200,000. A full account of the real fraud is available on the Parlington website. Further, it is highly likely that old Colonel Gascoigne, in his 92nd year, was deeply affected by the fraud, and it could easily have contributed to his death on the 12th of June, 1905. Although in the transcript of the trial, it is assumed that the discovery of the fraud occurred after the Willings were interviewed by Inspector Arrow, it is likely indeed, I believe inevitable, that Beckett's Bank on Park Row, Leeds, later Barclays Bank, now a pub with the name Beckett's, must have contacted the old colonel after the fraud was uncovered and the money returned to his account. The shock may well have killed him.